Hey, Rick.
Yo, what's up?
What it is.
Hey, man.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Who else we got showing up? Bob. Hey, Bob. How you doing, buddy? We have Sarah. We have Sean.
Oh, my God. You have a lot of people.
Yeah, they're rolling in.
Wow. Wish my meetups were this good. So, where's everybody coming from? Where do you guys? How is everybody doing with as far as this coronavirus thing or the situation from working from home? Everybody working from home?
Yes, I am in Wellington, working from home.
Nice. Enrique, you are muted. In
No.
Wellington, nice. Did you always work from home, or did you work from home only now?
No, just now. I work as a graphic designer in Palm Beach Gardens.
Nice. Fantastic.
I've been seeing this funny tweet going around asking who drove the technical revolution in their company, the CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19. Most people select COVID-19.
Yeah.
What changed the whole world around?
Mm-hmm.
I've posted this since this is a remote meetup. I took the opportunity and posted it to a couple of different, more international platforms. I posted this on my workplace for Cognizant Soft Vision, not only for the West Palm Beach studio that I normally do, but I opened it up to all of Cognizant Soft Vision. So we might have a couple of people dropping in from there.
Nice.
And there's another Slack group that I've been invited to that's more global, international, and I posted that in there as well. So I'm going to give people a couple of minutes. Potentially we'll have people from different time zones jumping in.
Nice.
I want to give them an opportunity to join us.
I think Steve wins because Steve is in Mars.
There you go.
I see that.
Anybody got cool backgrounds? Anybody who's known me for a while should be able to.
Yeah, I like that, Kathy. It's a good background. That's awesome.
Hey, Kathy.
That's pretty good. And Ricky had a good background, but now he's gone. Because at work, they're telling us, they're asking us, pardon me, they're not telling us, they're suggesting that we turn on our webcam. So you don't have to do anything here. This is, an organization. Hey, that's the best webcam ever. And it was to be more social with people and all that, but where's my camera? Oh, there's a camera. Okay. So,
yeah, I've read
and
some
to look at
I've read some articles on the etiquettes in the past, so definitely have to have it turned on. But I got kids over here and a whole bunch of stuff going.
Again, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just like I wanted to start a conversation to see how people are doing with that. They have been okay with sharing and not. My boss at the beginning was super happy with it, and then all of a sudden it's like nope, for whatever reason. And I've gone dark.
Yeah, we see the back of your computer now.
Oh well, that's now you guys know what the back of the computer looks like. Let's see. Is this a good
place behind the desk?
I'm gonna click.
Wow, and it's stuck there. Wow. Yeah. Well, the front's not working. Oh, I know why the front's not working because I'm covering it.
Unacceptable, Damien.
Exactly. Thanks. In the middle of my speech about how everybody should turn on their webcam. By the way, I was not saying everybody should turn on the webcam. You should do whatever you wish. But at my work, they've asked us to turn on the webcam.
It sounded like a threat.
Yeah, it should be. But it's a meatless threat. What's the word? I'm vegetarian, so I don't know what the word is. What's it? Helpless threat? Useless threat? Funny threat?
All of those things.
I like it.
You know what? I'm going to stand up. I've got a
Hello?
fancy stand-at-home desk.
Hello, welcome. Oh my, we're all coming up with you. Who said hello?
Oh, I think it was me that said hollow thread.
I hear.
Oh. Steve, you have the best images. Oh my God. Well, this webcam does not want to turn on. All right, we'll have to use this one. You guys don't mind looking at a fan, do you? Let's try to make it a little better.
All right, so we're about 5 minutes into it. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Hope everyone is staying safe and everyone is not going too stir crazy being on lockdown. Today we're going to be talking about Vue and TypeScript. There is a little bit of a prerequisite that you guys at least understand a little bit of Vue because I want to talk more about the TypeScript and the differences. But before we get started, Damien, I think we have a sponsor for today.
And apparently I should be unmuted when it is. We do. We have the sponsor that has helped us in many times in the past, and we want to thank them for that. And especially this nowadays, some of you guys are working from home and you're doing great. Some of you guys had the opportunity to do that. I have been very lucky to do that. If there's anybody else that you know that isn't so lucky and now is sitting looking for a job, that's where Sarah and Signature Consultants really comes in there. Sarah, do you have a presentation or a screen you want to share with us with a couple of slides?
Yes. I think
I'm going to stop sharing real quick.
Yep.
I'm not able to. Oh, there we go. Share my screen.
Perfect.
Okay, let me try it now. Okay.
We can see it.
Signature consultant.
You guys can see it?
We can.
Okay.
We see your
Awesome.
notes though.
Oh, can you see my notes?
That's all right.
It's fine. Let's see. And slideshow. Let's do this. Okay, that's gonna have to happen because I don't know how to do that. So yeah, special shout out to Damien and everyone here for letting Signature be a sponsor for Palm Beach JavaScript Meetup. We are a big fan of this group and have learned a lot personally from being involved in this group. I just wanted to introduce myself. So like Damien said, my name is Sarah Norton. I am an account manager with Signature Consultants. So if you don't know of Signature, we are a nationwide IT staffing firm that's actually headquartered down here in South Florida. So we're based out of Fort Lauderdale. We actually opened up a West Palm Beach office about 2 months ago. So we're really expanding quite significantly in the Palm Beach market right now. I know one of my clients is NextEra Energy, so I work with them on a lot of roles, as well as some other companies up in the Palm Beach area. But I focus primarily on Palm Beach and Broward County. We do have some clients in Dade as well. We actually have a whole Miami office to support that county. So I know there's a lot of changes going on in the industry right now and just across the US and world really. So wanted to really reach out to all of you guys, tell you a little bit about Signature's model. So obviously we are a staffing firm, but our whole company is founded on the belief of doing the right thing and being friends first. So of course our job is to put people to work and help people find jobs. But we want to help everyone out right now. So Norwegian and Royal, we're a big client of Signature. We are #1 vendor down there. So obviously, I'm sure you guys have heard a bunch of layoffs. So we're doing our best to redeploy consultants and people who have lost their jobs. That's actually a big program and focus of 2020. I'll get to a bit more later and tell you more. But right now, I wanted to go over the opportunities we have. So these are all some of the many open positions that we currently have clients looking for. So Scrum Masters, a lot of Java developers, a lot of JavaScript as well, business analysts, and such. So if you know of anyone or you yourself is looking, definitely feel free to reach out. On the last slide of this is my contact information and then my lead recruiter's contact information. she is moving tomorrow, so she wasn't able to make this call, packing up everything. But we definitely love to talk to each and every one of you, and just, even if it's about gauging where the market's at and what's going to happen, all those conversations are super helpful. So these are just some of the opportunities we have right now. But before everything with coronavirus kind of spread and started things going crazy, these are positions that we see every day from multiple clients all throughout the Tri-County area. So business analysts, project managers, and developers are probably the three skill sets we see every day new jobs coming in for, as well as some of these other positions. So just wanted to share those with you. And then just a little bit more about our redeployment efforts in 2020. So just this year alone, what we define as redeployment is if a contractor and the project gets cut, a lot of what's going on with the cruise lines right now, they get fired because budget and coronavirus, we are immediately working with them and marketing them to our other clients. So in 2020, we have a 53% redeployment rate. So people that are laid off and finding them new jobs, I think it's within a month or a month and a half span, we have them working again as a signature consultant. So that's something we're really proud of, and protecting those relationships and the people that trust in us to find them roles and giving back to them. So that's a bit about us and kind of our model and our business that we see throughout the Tri-County area, but would love to talk to any of you that are looking or anyone that just wants to talk. If you know someone, please feel free to reach out to myself. Like I said, I'm Sarah Norton. My lead recruiter is Rania Hall. We both work really closely with Damian and the different meetup groups. So Rania works specifically with IT candidates, people in the market that are looking. So she has access to all the jobs. I myself work on more of the client side. When someone has a need, they're able to come to me and I help find them positions with working with Rania. So we work hand in hand together. I used to be a recruiter myself, so I know the market just like she does. So reach out to either one of us. We'd love to have a conversation. Our emails are there, and then I'll also send those, my email and Rania's email, in the chat feature so that you guys can have access to that, or reach out to me directly in the chat feature. I believe Damian was telling me that's able to do. So we'd love to hear from you guys and just see how you're doing with all this. I know I'm struggling with the whole work and remote thing, so love to talk to other people about everything. But thank you guys for attending and letting us sponsor.
Yes, thank you for sponsoring us. So one of the cool things about the remote conversation we're having here is if anybody wants to reach out to her directly, there's an option in the chat to talk to her directly, so that if you want to hang out for a little bit and potentially someone will reach out to you, that's a great way to do that. There's two things I wanted to mention is to use the chat room. I'm going to mute everybody just as a blanket. If you have a question or if you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself and interrupt me, feel free to do so. You can do that by just unmuting yourself. Thumbs up, everyone's clear. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and get started. Where's my meetup? There it is.
Oh, there we go. Someone was saying it was hard to hear us. Rick, is that, can you hear us? Is it hard on YouTube? We're on YouTube, guys, by the way. But is it?
I'm on Zoom, so I can hear you fine, Damian. I can't hear Jeremy very well.
How about now?
Oh, that's a little better, yeah. Ooh.
Okay.
Wow.
I've got a little closer to my mic.
Voice.
Yeah.
That was magic.
All right, cool. Can everyone see my screen? I'm presenting TypeScript in Vue.
We can.
Awesome. All right, so today's talk, I want to talk about my experiences with the first experience with TypeScript. I'm going to talk about how to set it up. I'm going to show the initial differences, talk about Vue Router, Vuex, the Vue and TypeScript config files, and a little deeper dive into the Vue component. So hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy, also known as Germbo on the Slacks and the GitHubs. I'm the community manager and front-end tech lead at Cognizant Soft Vision. I host monthly meetups like this. I want to give a big shout out to Damian for hooking this up, putting this together. We are co-organizers for the Boca JS and the Palm Beach JavaScript. And I help run a nonprofit called Code Palm Beach, where we're dedicated to teaching kids to code. You can follow me at Twitter, GitHub, and the Palm Beach Tech Slack. I'm at Germbo. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the meetup and the nonprofit toward the end of the slides. All right, so diving right into it, the setup. What I'm about to present is the setup that I use most often with the with the only addition of Vue and TypeScript. If you don't know, the best way to start a Vue application is to use the CLI. You install it globally, and you run Vue create some app. All right, the first thing we need to do is to select manual options. So these are screenshots of me going through the Vue CLI. I wanted to show off how cool the Vue CLI is and how many options you had there. So the first one is to not choose default and select manually select features. I use Babel, TypeScript, Router, Vuex, CSS preprocessors, and ESLint and Formatter. There's a pretty cool thing in here for the PWA. I personally haven't used that yet. Maybe we'll get to Enrique to talk about his experience with the FART app here. And I should be a unit tester and end-to-end tester, but I don't. Sorry. And I've made a conscious decision to not use class-style components. The first time I worked on the project, I was using it, and I didn't really like the feel of it. It felt a little too much like Angular, and it took me away from the Vue that I grew to love, right? So I turned off the class style components, and that's going to come with some caveats I'm going to talk about here in a little bit. Use Babel alongside with TypeScript. Babel's generally a good idea in most things, so it defaulted to yes, so I kept it. And then history mode. I use this, I don't mind the hashtag being in my URL. I've had more problems with it not being in there. If I don't have a server set up and to like hydrate the page and do all that good stuff. So I generally turn that off, and that allows me to have the hashtag in the view. I'm sorry, in the URL. The CSS preprocessor choice is the SCSS. Node.ss is just a default of mine. I hear good things about Dart.ss. I just haven't used it yet. Maybe in the near future, I'll be able to pick that up and see what the difference is. I hear it's much faster. And then the ESLint and standard config. This is something that's pretty nice that helps me establish the rules. We had a big debate on this in the Slack channel a little while ago about lint files and config files and whatnot. And my general rule of thumb is set it up at the beginning of the project and forget about it. The fact that we're arguing about single quotes versus double, semicolon versus not, tabs versus spaces, those are terrible arguments to have. Set it up in the lint and forget about it. And I like to lint on save, and we could also do lint and fix on commit if we were to have the GitHub commit or the Git hooks or anything like that. So the setup is pretty straightforward. It's follow the bouncing ball, and you pick the options you want. Vue is pretty full featured, so you can mix and match anything you want, and it all just plays nicely together. The last thing I like to do is add these to dedicated config files. So this will be like a Babel RC file or .eslint RC file, things like that. So instead of muddying up the package.json, they're little dedicated dot files. All right, the initial differences. At first glance, the immediate things I noticed were all the JS files were changed to TS files. Some of the Vue files had new syntax. There were 2 shim files, and the project now had a tsconfig.json file. What are those? So let's talk about the .ts extension. In SCSS extension, any valid CSS is acceptable in that file format. So any valid CSS is valid SCSS. The same is true with the .ts extension. While looking through any of the files, there was no special TypeScript features included. And it wasn't until opening the Hello World component that I saw any difference in the files to start with. The Vue component, let's talk about that real quick. There were 2 main differences in the .vue file. and it was mainly around the section tag. The section itself had a lang TS property, and the Vue class extended, or you exported a Vue default that it extended the Vue. That's it. So we have our lang TS file, we import Vue, and then we Vue.extend. That was the only major difference I've seen right off the bat. After doing a little research, I wasn't really sure what the Vue, shim Vue and the shim TSX files were, but doing research, these are files that help the IDE understand what your project was and what .vue files were. And the shim.tsx was to help any JSX support in your code. So, okay, Vue gave this to me. That's pretty nice. I didn't have to do anything with that. I shouldn't have to touch anything in there. The really cool thing is the tsconfig file. This is a very important file. It gives the engine all it needs to know about the project and where to find it. We're going to touch on this again a little later, but this is the default version that comes out. Nothing super special here. What we're going to touch on later are these paths. The thing to note about this is that it's auto-generated for you. So you don't have to touch this unless you're wanting to add extra features to this or libraries. Adding Vuetify, for example, I had to add a type and add the Vuetify extension here. Otherwise, it didn't know about that. But that's a little out of scope of what I want to talk about today. Now, since I selected Vue Router, I wanted to dive into that and see what was different. Outside the files extension changing to TS, nothing was different. I didn't see anything different that justified why this needed to be a .ts file. I'm sure there's a type on the router that I haven't dug into yet that I should be able to type these as. But for the most part, again, out of the box, it didn't change anything. Vue does this setup where we have the component and we're doing this importing, and we have a Webpack chunk name. This is pretty cool for lazy loading your route. So if your user only ever goes to a particular page, a particular route in your application, they're only loading that particular chunk because I've sectioned it to be Webpack chunk name home. I wanted to point that out because not a lot of people know about that. And this is a pretty cool feature to help reduce the initial file size of the load of your application. This has nothing to do with TypeScript. I just thought that was cool to point out. That's it with Vue Router. Again, nothing changed. I use it exactly like I normally would. And I don't have any special type-ins with that. That might change in the future. I should probably give a caveat to this. I'm relatively new to TypeScript, and I'm trying to figure out the benefits of using this in a project. And so far, loving it. Vuex. Vuex has gotten a bit more complex. You interact with it the same way, but now I need to split everything up into their own files and add data types to everything. Typically, I start with the stores index file. In any app, I like to make everything have be their own store with a namespace and very little in the global state. So this is the global namespace that I have going on right now. In my store/index.ts file, I'm importing Vue, importing Vuex, and store options. I've also got a root state. I've prefixed this with root state, and I'm importing that from the same folder as store, as we notice up here in the top right. And the root state is simply just a version. I haven't figured out what to do with that 100% yet. And then my modules are imported like they normally would be. So I have a folder called users with my actions, getters, setters, and state, all related to user, and I'm importing them there. And I'm exporting a new vuex.store with a data type of root state. This syntax is a little weird to me, being that I am not from a traditionally strong type language. the more I use it, the better understanding I get of it, and the more it looks normal to me. So if this stuff looks jarring, it's just a matter of practice and understanding why things are there. We're going to see a lot of these square brackets or angle brackets come up in different places. All right, so we saw that I imported a user, and that's my user interface. So now we need to create the user interface, and all inside the folder, we're going to create actions, getters, footers, and mutations. Or I have actions in there twice. So the first one is the interfaces. This is important to set a contract, right? The way I understand interfaces is they're just saying this is what the object is supposed to be. If there's anything else in there, it's going to throw an error. Like if I'm using it and I try to add a phone number, it's going to throw an error because it's not defined in the interface. So this is the contract saying my user is only going to have name, email, and potentially a profile image. This question mark means it's optional. I don't have to have that in there, but the two required items are name and email. Now I have a user state where I have the current state is logged in, last active, and user. Now notice user is a user object. So this is how we get to use more complex data objects instead of just string or booleans or numbers or dates. In a normal Vuex, we declare a state object and assign them some values. But this limits us this limits us from using types. So we have to declare variables and assign them to state. We're going to look at the example that we would do without TypeScript. So this is not the way that I would do this in TypeScript. This is the way I used to do this. So I'm exporting const state, and this object here is just key value pairs, is logged in false, last active is yesterday, user with its particular information. So how do I type this user to be, user, or last active to be a string, or is logged in to be a Boolean, or anything of that nature? I can't, right? This is what limits me. So looking at the way we do this in TypeScript, first I import all of my interfaces for iUser and iUser state. I create a constant called user, I type it to user, and I give it the default value. And then when I export the state, it is of state iUser, and iUser had current state and logged in is active, and user. Now this syntax down here, why didn't I do the user : user? Well, that's because this is ES6. If the key is the same thing as the variable that's being used, it's redundant. I don't have to do user : user. Just passing in user is the same thing. Okay, getters. It's a common pattern to use getters to get specific information from a state without having to reference state itself and go down, deep dive into the nested objects. Since all the keys on the objects are just methods, we can directly add them to the return object. And each method should have a return value, as getters only return values. Let's look at what that might be. So the first thing we need to do for TypeScript is to import the getter tree from Vuex. I need my interface for user state and my interface for root state. I export const getters. This getter tree needs to take two types. I need the iUser state and the iRoot state. This took me a little bit of getting used to. After reading documentation about this, it wasn't really quite clicking until I was just taking out iRoot state and seeing it compile wrong, and then taking out iUser state and seeing it compile wrong. So this is a pretty big piece to understand. If this doesn't make sense yet, I encourage you to go back to documentation. I have an article coming up that I'll point out again that really helped me understand why all of this is important. So the objects, again, are just methods, right? So we're returning get name, and the return value of that is a string. So how we annotate what is expected to come out of this object or this method is by colon and some value, so a string. Or down here, we have a colon Boolean, right? So is user logged in? I'm expecting a true or false to come out of that. In get username, I'm expecting a string to come out. If anything in here in the return statement returns anything other than a string, then that's wrong. It'll, the IntelliSense will kick in and give me that squiggly line. So that's a win right there. Actions are where we perform async tasks, things like saving to a database or writing to local storage or anything that requires multiple steps. Much like getters, these can be added to the object directly as they are just methods. So here's what that looks like. This looks pretty much the same thing. The only difference in this context is the action tree versus the getter tree. And importing that from Vuex, I still have my my user state and my root state, and I'm typing the actions as an action tree for iUser state and iRoot state. In Vue, we can set these things to be async functions. So that's why we have the async save to local. I get an object that I can destructure and get the state and commit methods or properties on that object. And this action doesn't really return anything, as it shouldn't. So I data type that to avoid. I'm expecting nothing to be returned from here. The first thing I want to do is I want to commit and set status. I want to await, set everything to the local storage. I want to update the active timestamp, and then I want to reset the status back to save. This is a typical multiple step, something that I'm writing to a database on, action that I might have in my application. Now, mutations are pretty straightforward. That is where we are doing the actual mutation, right? They're typically called from an action and should only typically only perform one thing per function. You'll notice that I used uppercase and for each letter and separated the words by underscores. Strictly naming convention. I like this because in the Vue DevTools, I can clearly see a difference between what an action is and what a mutation is, but this is purely convention, right? Looking at the mutation, so the user mutation.ts, the only difference in this scenario is a mutation tree versus the action tree or the getter tree. Now, why the mutation tree only takes one is probably because of typo. I should have root state in there as well. And the state that's coming in, so a mutation takes two properties, a state and a payload. I call it status and time in this scenario, but that is completely arbitrary. It's relative to the data. If you look at the documentation, it is the payload. So a mutation is called by an action, and the mutation is what directly updates the state. For all the React people out there, this is very similar to the Redux flow of things. All right, now let's tie all these together. I just made these individual files that were action, getter, mutators, or modules. And now I'm putting these all together. So we have state, getters, actions, and mutations. The module from Vuex, again, takes the iUser state and the iRoot state. Nothing new there. The only difference is I have a namespace in here. And the reason why I set namespace to true is because I want these things to be nice and isolated from each other. Vuex doesn't necessarily have an idea of isolation in the context of going down a object path. Everything is on the same level, and it has a string that you pass to it that is user slash whatever action, user slash whatever mutation, user slash whatever getter inside of a string. It's all on one level, and it's separated by how they're imported and if this namespace is true. And again, I like the separation of concerns in there. I don't have much in my global states. Everything has got their own proper place. So that was a lot. The Vuex was the biggest hurdle I had to get over to really understanding and getting the power of this. Once I've gotten into the Vuex, side of things, typed everything, I started getting the IntelliSense immediately in my Vue components, which I'll talk a little bit about coming up. But first, I got to talk about the Vue and TypeScript config files. One of the first things I did was try to figure out in a normal Vue setup how to get aliases working. The reason I did that is because nested components and relative paths are a recipe for disaster. With just the Vue config file, aliasing, we lose traceability of the file, meaning I can no longer click on an import and follow it to that destination, and the import functionality gets kind of lost as well. But it's something I dealt with because it was more important to have the consistency with the names versus the relative pathing. As I moved things up and down in the project structure, things got lost. So this is a vue.config.js file that lives inside of the project root, so next to the source and the public files. And there's a lot we can do in here, such as define what preprocessors we want in here, any extra libs that we want to include in here, and anything we want to enhance Webpack for, but don't want to go into the Webpack file itself specifically. This is where we do that. The one thing I care about here for this demonstration are aliases. So on the config resolve alias, the set method has two properties. What do I want to change? Like what's the string? And then what is the path that is going to replace that? By default, Vue gives us the @ and that represents the root of our project. It brings us all the way back up to the source. But I commonly misspell components, and it takes me way too long to figure out that I've spelled components wrong, right? So like I'll either not have an extra N in there, or I'll have too many N's, or I'll forget the T in the wrong spot. And it's just embarrassing how long it takes me to figure out. So I wanted an alias to @comps will bring me to my components folder. Same thing for Vue, services, and interfaces. Okay, that's cool, but the caveats that I mentioned are a bummer, but something I was willing to deal with. When using this in a project, so I'm in a Vue component, I import Vue, and then now I import header from @comps/common/UI/header. Wherever this happens to lay, wherever this file happens to lay, this could be a potential path. I have to go up 4 folders and then go down. I think if this folder structure ever changes and I decide that this file doesn't need to live there, then this path breaks, and that's too brittle for me. I don't like that. But I do miss the autocomplete features. This is where the tsconfig comes back into play. Let's take a look at what we can do to tsconfig. Now, the ... dots represent just me collapsing all the other information, because the only relevant information is this path in this context. All right, so notice I have the same paths, the @comps, the @views. The addition is the /*, and the path that this is referring to. Basically what this is doing is this is telling the TypeScript compiler that when I type this /something, I'm referring to this particular folder, right? Now, I have a huge caution alert coming up here in a second. Being that Vue is that we're trying to make Vue a TypeScript project, we need to specify the extension that each one of these aliases is expecting. If we don't, if we just have the asterisk there without the .vue or the, I think I had SAS in another project, .scss, then it's always going to assume that I'm looking for a .ts file. And this causes huge problems in not only my linting, but the compiling. Because even though it's looking at the right folder and it found the right thing, the compilation file is looking for a .ts. So having to specify that this is a .vue inside the comps, or .vue inside the views, versus the .ts in the services and interfaces was something that took me, I want to say, damn near a day to figure out. And this was bugging a lot of my contacts that were TypeScript gurus in the office. So this was a pretty big deal that you need to be aware of. If you don't have these in here, it's not going to work the way you think it will. But having used that, now I get all the IntelliSense that I can ever want. Another caution is even though the auto import, the IntelliSense of what you have available to you is there, and you start typing it in your code, it'll auto import, but it'll auto import with a relative path. I don't know if there's a way to auto import based on the absolute path, or even if that's a big deal. Like, how much effort should I put into figuring that out? If someone can, any TypeScript people out there can help me figure that out, that'd be much appreciated. But I noticed this problem too in Angular projects, that auto imports were always relative paths. So I'm not sure if that's a solvable issue, or if anybody's already figured that out and got a Medium article about it or something. I'd be much appreciative to get that. All right, so Vue components. This is where all of this gets tied together. I mentioned Vue components briefly at the beginning, but now that we have a foundation of how TypeScript is sprinkled through our application to help make lives easier, the Vue components and the composition of them is how all of this stuff starts to benefit. And I saw the benefits of TypeScript almost immediately with doing very little to it. The biggest item was props for me. Props we use like we normally do in the Vue app. The only difference is we cast either the object or an array with an arrow function that returns the interface we desire. The syntax is a little jarring, but this is that article that I was talking about that helped me understand and put the pieces together of when using a non-class-based component, how to do all the things that we want to do. I have a feeling that this is going to get a little better with Vue 3 and the composition API, but we're stuck with this now and waiting for whenever Vue 3 is going to officially come out. So strictly looking at the scripts portion of a single Vue file, we import the Vue and the iUser interface. We're going to need that later. And then we export default Vue extend. This prop section here, notice I have a user. This is typically how Vue expects you to declare these as what type they are and if they're required. And there's an optional third one here for default. This syntax is what I'm talking about as being weird. So this type, what is type? I can't put iUser here. So type : iUser, because iUser is an interface. And again, to my understanding, an interface is just a contract. It's not a thing. We're not instantiating that. We're just saying, I'm expecting these properties to be on this particular object. And being that this is a normal JavaScript object, what I'm saying there is type : iUser. What is that? It's an unknown. It'll cause an error. Okay, so type : object. Well, that's not 100% true, right? Yes, it is an object. It has key values to it, but I'm specifically needing an object of iUser. That's where this as arrow function comes into play. There's a thread on that in that article that links to the whole discussion on the pull request as to why this is a good idea, and they went through a couple of iterations on this. We could also do user, and at the curly bracket that closes the user, we can say as iUser down there. I don't know why one would be better than the other. This was the first scenario that I got working. The other one kept giving me import error, saying I was importing this variable but never using it, even though I had it down there. So I'm not really 100% sure why one would be better than the other. This just happened to be the first time that it worked, or the first solution that worked. Now, computed properties and methods are a thing of beauty that Vuex provides to us. And since we spent so much time setting up our stores with the proper types, we can now import them using Vuex with the helpers like we normally would. That portion doesn't change at all. So we have our import statements with the map state, getters, and actions. And we can simply in the computed properties, spread them out. So map state ... This map state, map getters, and map actions take 2 arguments. The first argument is the namespace that we care about, and the individual methods or states or items that we want to get. So the ... represent anything that I want to pull in. I can pass in everything, but I have to manually add them in there. Or I can just add one particular item in a sea of getters. Same thing with map actions. Now, this doesn't stop us from adding our own as well, right? So there are scenarios where I don't want a computed property or a method inside of my state. I just need that local to that particular component. So I can still do that with this information, and we can still get the beauty of TypeScript by telling it to return a particular type, right? And this is logged in tomorrow is returning the type of Boolean, right? This format date, I'm accepting a parameter. I'm expecting that parameter to be a string, and I'm expecting this to return a string. So if as soon as I turn this into a number, this return statement for format date, it'll throw an error because it's expecting to throw a string back. And all of that just helps you during author time find errors. So the biggest benefit that I found to using TypeScript is the author time errors. A lot of times, you know, I'll mean to put in a string or I'll need to get a number and I'll have the opposite that's out there. So by typing these things in just these simple ways right here with string, Boolean, number, etc., you'll catch a lot of those dumb errors that you make, and it'll take you, you know, a little too long to figure out and to debug and whatnot. So that's the immediate benefit from there. The TypeScript for the interfaces, that is a little bit, in my opinion, more advanced, but is one of the essential pieces to that, right? So the first thing you do is to type it with the string or Boolean or number. The next thing to do is to create your own user types. And that's the talk. So I wanted to thank everybody for coming out. I know these are very scary times that we're in. I hope everyone is safe. If anybody wants to view all of my talks, this particular talk has been translated to Markdown file, and all of my talks live on my GitHub page. So go to github.com/Jernbo/talks, and you'll see everything in there. Being that we're usually in a room with each other, I have a couple of spiels that I like to give at the end of each talk. The first one is the Palm Beach Tech Slack channel. If you are not a part of the Palm Beach Tech Slack channel, the link to it is in there. It's palmbeachtech.org/Slack. We have a very active developers channel among other channels, but that's the one I'm the most proud of, the one I'm most active in. If you have a question about something, throw it up there. I guarantee you there's someone that's there willing to help, debug and point you in the right direction. Or if there's someone who's posting a question in there and you happen to know the answer, that's a great way to give back to the community. Again, we're very active in there, and there's a lot of people willing to help. Code Palm Beach is a nonprofit organization dedicated to teaching kids to code. If you are looking to give back to the community, please consider volunteering and mentoring kids at our monthly meetups. You can start the process to join our meetups by going to codepalmbeach.org/volunteer. If mentoring and in-person/teaching isn't your thing, please consider contributing to our open source projects. I have 2 tools that I've created for the enhancement of teaching kids to type code HTML and CSS with our Cosmic Checker. And the Cosmic Typer is a tool I've created to teach the kids how to use the keyboard. A lot of them are iPad generation, and they don't know they need to hit shift, like hold shift and hit comma to get the caret. So this is a fun little interactive way to teach them to type, teach them a little bit of HTML, and make it fun and interactive for them. And the last thing I want to mention is these meetups are for you guys, right? You don't necessarily have to be an expert to come up here and talk about anything that you're interested in. I'm happening to learn TypeScript with my Vue projects. I am by no means a TypeScript expert, but I felt like this was important enough to share. I've learned a lot in the very short amount of time that I've been putting together this project for the Cognizant Soft Vision, and I felt it was a good way for me to solidify the knowledge that I've been learning by teaching it. If anybody has an idea that that they want to come talk about, please feel free to do so. Reach out to Damian Montero or myself, and we will make the next meetup your meetup.
I like that.
Yeah.
Very nice.
How's everybody doing? Any questions for me? So now we can like jump into like a little bit of Q&A or something like that. And
During the presentation, we had everybody muted, so make sure to unmute yourself so that we can see you or hear from you. Pardon me.
Is there this is Daniel here. Hello,
what's
guys.
up, Daniel?
For your talk, Jeremy, and hello, Damien. Nice to see you guys. Jeremy, where can we see like a playground of this Vue project that you're trying to do, or something like that? You have like a code pen that we can extend from or something?
Not yet. The project that I'm working on that stemmed from the TypeScript is an internal project, so I had to change some things about it. The TypeScript portion of it wasn't anything that was proprietary, but the application is Cognizant Soft Vision, and I haven't really figured out a way to mask that side of things and show off something. But this did lead me down the path of revamping my Futurama quiz app. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can notice, but I got my Planet Express going on back there.
Nice. I thought you were in space.
Exactly.
With Steve here, that's in the Matrix.
He's in the Matrix. So to answer your question directly, Daniel, no, I don't have anything at the moment, but it is something that's in the works.
Okay.
I always love the idea, and I know it's just too complicated for people to do. For people to get together, almost a hackathon style, and try to sort of build something together, something similar to that. One of these days we'll figure out how to do that. But it's just like, it's like, oh, no problem. Let's all get together in our college dorms. Oh, wait a minute, we don't do that anymore. Okay, so. That's amazing.
And another thing is using like you said, sparkling a little bit of TypeScript on Vue. Is that like the new way? Do you think things are going in regards to developing with Vue, or
Yeah. So it's kind of a two-part question in my opinion. Are things going the way of TypeScript? I say absolutely, right? Vue not only is being written in TypeScript from the ground up for Vue 3, but all of the other frameworks, if they're not already written in it, are being rewritten in it. And there is a huge shift to natively support TypeScript in all of the languages. React is already very TypeScript friendly. Angular is built on TypeScript, and you can only use it with TypeScript. Svelte is working on making TypeScript a first-class citizen in all those contexts. So yes, it is the direction these types of applications are going in. The best way I suggest to start getting your feet wet with this is the same advice I would give to people starting with CSS preprocessors. Just change your CSS file to .scss file, and you've got SCSS components, right? Same thing with TypeScript. Get the build process in place and just change all of your .ts file or JS files to .ts, and you're good to go. You can start by simply making your methods that return something, data typing those, or if you create a variable, data typing or typing that, and I should say data typing. So yeah, that's a good way to start and get going on that.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey guys, great presentation. That was very good. This is Felipe de Moura here. One quick question on TypeScript. When you're building, I know you could do that with Vue with the CLI, but how did you hit any hurdle or anything? You talk about like the changing of the extension, but when you did npm run build, right? Does the transpiler and then are you using the TypeScript, or does Vue has an extension that you could leverage on that?
Yeah, so Vue, when you add TypeScript, there's a few more packages that are installed in the package.json, and the tsconfig file takes over and does things with it. So Vue hides away the Webpack from you and gives you the Vue config to kind of inject little things in there. So there was no caveats or anything funky that came up when trying to compile my TypeScript when running Vue. Just going through the simple setup that I showed you at the beginning and running npm run serve, everything worked hunky-dory. There were times where I mistyped things, or ESLint complained about things that TypeScript wanted. So figuring out how to get ESLint and TypeScript to play nice with each other has been a little bit of a challenge. And the last thing that I find kind of weird is, even though I data type a prop, so my component has a prop that has a particular data type, when I call that, when I use that component and pass the prop into it, there's no way for me to, in the template portion of the Vue file, to say that that is the right data type being passed in. For example, if the option, the prop is supposed to be number, and I pass in a string in the template, it doesn't catch that. There's no red squiggly underline in the template. It makes sense why. Like React does that better than Vue in this case, because React is all JavaScript, and being that you're working in JavaScript and React, it catches that the typing works as you expect it. And this is something that I've recently run into and haven't found a solution for. But that's the only weird thing that I've noticed. If I type a prop, when I pass in that prop, there's no way for me to know that the component is passing in the right type at compile.
And even though I think the prop, you could specify what type, right? You would specify if it's a string, an array type, or an object. But it's pretty interesting to see that TypeScript still, when you use it within the template, right?
Yeah.
There's probably a miscommunication there from TypeScript to Vue.
I mean, it makes sense because TypeScript is a JavaScript language, and the template is meant to be separate from, so that way we're not having HTML in our JavaScript. So it kind of makes sense why TypeScript isn't giving that to us. But I feel like that's a problem that should be solved.
Awesome, but hey, that was a great presentation. Really enjoy. I'm getting more into Vue.js. Done some TypeScript before, but I was interested to know how the experience was, and this was very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to do it. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Hey, Jeremy, I got a quick question for you. This is Cecil.
Hey.
Real quick. So great presentation. Definitely, I appreciate all the stuff that you were sharing. I had a question about the tooling though, kind of like following up with that previous question. How much of that tooling story you think could be solved by Vue or whatever it's called, like the VS Code extension for Vue.js? Because I know some of the things that gives you, right, is in addition to like what you get out of the compiler and the command line tools, based on the language server or whatever it is that it comes with.
Yeah.
So do you think like some of the issues that you're seeing in terms of being able to get some of that error checking, versus for types and things of that nature, is that something that we could report to that extension and have them take a look at it?
That'd be interesting, because I do have Vue installed, and the two issues that I had was, one, when I was making a specific prop be a particular type, it was complaining that the interface was a variable defined but never used, right? That was an ESLint rule, not a TypeScript rule. So that was more of a conflict between TS and ES messing with each other, right? So I eventually fixed that with a, you know what? I don't know exactly what I did. It's in a code. It's in a pull request right now in the project, and I haven't really thoroughly vetted through that. But it's issue between those two. And then the second thing is being when passing the prop in the template. That's an interesting question. Can Vueter solve that for us? Right. I mean, right now it's not. Maybe I'm using it wrong. Maybe it does support it and I just haven't dove into it. But absolutely. I'll dig into that a little bit more and potentially suggest something to Vueter.
Cool. Well, other than that, yeah, great presentation, man. This is cool.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Very nice.
Hey, Rick, how bad did I do with all my TypeScript explanations?
It was all good, man. It's all good.
Nothing blatantly wrong that needs to be pointed out and corrected?
No, it's good.
So I should not say those things you commented on me privately. I won't say it out loud. Got it.
That's just between you and me.
Awesome.
That's fantastic, Jeremy.
All right, so I want to thank everybody for coming out. We've had, I think at the peak, 25 people show up. So I appreciate everyone taking the time out and joining us. We will be doing these every month like normal. They just won't be in person. And again, big thank you to Damian for putting this all together, letting us use his Zoom and testing this with me last week and yesterday to make sure all this went smoothly. If we can give a round of applause, give it to that guy. It's him that put this all together. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes. And I'll make sure to put in the comments, if you guys are interested, you can reach out to Sarah for any jobs. But regarding to what you're saying, I'll put in the YouTube video. You'll see Jeremy. You'll see his face. You'll see his presentation. So you can definitely ask any questions you have right now, even if there's something you missed. But check out the comments area for the video. That should be coming up within about half an hour afterwards. So, because we love you, Jeremy, and some of us got there late, and a lot of people reach out to me. They knew I was going to record this, so they reached out to me to find out that. So I want you guys all to know about that. Just check out the comments of this meetup.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Unless there's any last questions, I'll drop it off here.
I'm very new to coding. I'm a graphic designer, becoming a code developer. But anyways, I always wanted to know a little bit about Vue, and it was a good intro for me to get familiar with.
Very cool. Yeah, Vue is a very beginner-friendly framework. One of the things that helped me gravitate toward it was the replacement of jQuery as far as the CDN goes, and import of a Vue CDN. I didn't need a compile step. I didn't need any big folder structure or any of that stuff there. I was able to recreate a couple of components that I had created in jQuery in Vue just by pulling in the CDN, and that's what got me hooked on that framework. I feel React and Angular, you have to buy into their whole system. You have to, it's got to be a single page application or nothing. You can't use it in just little pieces here and there. People will argue with me that is not the case, but then I whip out my code pen, import the Vue from the CDN and start doing stuff. And I challenge anybody to do that in React and or Angular. And no one's met me with that challenge yet. So that's why I like it. It's very beginner friendly. If you know HTML and CSS and you know a little bit of JavaScript, and you're familiar with jQuery, Vue is a great place to dive in and get your feet wet with that without even doing any of the complex stuff that I've talked about with TypeScript, or learning what the single page application is and getting into the CLI and all that good stuff. But it's also just as inviting to do that if you wanted to, right? I like the separation of the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript in one file. So.
And like you said, he's I can tell you this. I mean, Jeremy will tell you this as well. He's built pretty complex applications with it as well. Right. So you guys are good of both worlds. I love the fact that we were seeing Daniel play for us in the middle of it. Serenading us, yes, I like that.
Get my guitar. I have to...
Oh, I like that. Even better. Let's get many of us. I'll sing.
Session.
All right. Yes. You guys all have a good night.
Good night. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, Daniel. No, Daniel. You got to play for us. Play for us. Come on.
Yeah. Let me see. bright smiles, and it seems to me we run each
Oh, sweet child of mine.
Good job, Damien.
Oh, sweet child of mine.
Eyes of the bluest skies, I bathe by the rain. I bathe to look into those eyes and feel something. It sure reminds me of the one safe place when I was a child.
Take it away, Damien.
Oh, sweet child of mine.
Thank you, guys. See you next Tuesday at the Meetup.
Stay safe.
Stay safe, guys.
Jeremy,
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Woo!